Once again, welcome. How many of you are CCA people coming to the Asian Art Museum for the first time? All right. Glad that you are joining us here at this august and fabulous institution. And how many of you have been to the museum before but are attending your first CCA-sponsored event? All right. So thank you for joining the CCA conversation. We are, as you may know, a small 2,000-student independent art, design, and architecture college, originally founded in Oakland in 1907, but now with a vibrant campus in the Potrero Flats, just a short distance away from here. It's great to have you here tonight. And it's great to launch this collaboration that Mark was just talking about. We are happy to have such a compelling speaker lead off this program, which is going to feature some of the world's best architects who are based in or working in Asia and the Asian diaspora. And we envision these two lectures as the beginning of a longer engagement that we hope will take root and grow, and that you'll be part of the inaugural audience for a longer-term partnership. And I'd like to thank Mark Mayer for initiating this project. The idea came from conversations that he started a year plus ago. And also I'd like to thank Claire Jacobson, Suhan Chen, and Rob Mintz for in various ways advancing and supporting this project as it gained traction. We also appreciate all those who've contributed to CCA's Architecture Lecture Series Fund, in particular Kimberly and Simon Blattner, who provided a lead gift for our series. So tonight's speaker, Minsuk Cho, born in Seoul, he studied architectural engineering at Yonsei University and architecture at Columbia University. After working for the New York firms of Colaton McDonald and Polshek and Partners, he completed a stint in Rotterdam at OMA, the Office for Metropolitan Architecture, the legendary proving ground for a whole generation of innovative architects who've come out of that office. In 1998, he founded Cho Slade Architecture in New York with James Slade, and 5 years later launched his own firm, Mass Studies, based in Seoul. And over the past 14 years, Cho's firm has imagined and built compelling designs that generate architecture. At least the early mission and agenda of the practice was to generate architecture from the intersection of mass production with mass society. In particular, the dense urbanism and cultural inventiveness of Seoul and other megacities. This agenda has played out in a variety of ways, and at times the firm's work has also escaped that agenda to explore new territory, as I'm sure we'll see in this evening's talk. But in some of the early projects, we see the firm working, organizing its work into categories such as mass matrix studies, which explored ways for systematic design protocols to generate heterogeneous and varied spatial and formal conditions. There was another cluster, mass movement studies, that looked at the ways stairs, ramps, and other paths of movement could open up spaces of decompression in a dense urban condition. And perhaps the broadest meaning of the firm's name and its agenda comes from the way Cho and his colleagues approach massing, which is an architect's term for the ways we arrange the solid volumes of buildings. In early residential projects like the chipped house and the cracked house, as well as in institutional work such as the Korean Pavilion from the Shanghai World Expo, the firm combined a fresh take on organizing human activities and articulating architectural surfaces with a consistently sharp approach to the fundamental act of giving shape to a building's mass. And if nothing else, we can take that as part of the firm's characteristic agenda. These mass studies have been exhibited in shows and biennials worldwide, and the work has earned the firm and its principal many awards. I won't go into those in any specificity. Please join me in welcoming Minsuk Cho.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jonathan, for your kind introduction, and thank you, Asian Art Museum. Such an honor to present my work in such a important place with an important mission. Thank you, Mark, and everyone here. Yes, I'll go through my work. It's math studies. I initially call my company when I come back to Korea 14 years ago, 2003. Math is a word also often used in science, like physics, and also in sociology, like mass media, mass culture, and that. I think it was we knew that it was somehow as in many things that intersects that in architecture, the sort of scientific, technological part, and social part, I think that was kind of important thing for me. And, you know, because usually these two things don't quite go together very well. It's not like technologically most advanced society. I mean, most advanced place becomes the most civilized society, as maybe we have seen recently nowadays, more. Anyhow, I think architecture has some hope for that because it's kind of as a one area that kind of deals with both at the same time. And we try to make it as elegant as possible, but let's go through it. First, let me see. Series of these pictures are our completed work over the last few years, just in a different context. And you'll see quite diverging. This is very first project we did. We call Pixel House, 80 square meter building. The children already have grown up. Tiny, almost sculpture size house. Two more systematic one, but I'm trying to show quite our work, although it has been quite limited, maybe partly consciously so in Korea mostly, but the context that we have been dealt with is we feel so blessed to deal with such a diverse conditions. Okay, this is exception, one in New York, very temporary installation called Ring Dome. And this one is almost like a Where's Waldo image, where our building is here. We've done, we're constantly exploring very small project to extra large project, but also at the same time, we deal with also various speed, various temporal condition, let's say super fast to super slow. Usually the super fast goes with the super big, which I hope the other way, you know, small because and then it gets very fast, but it's the other way around. Somehow, and also we deal with super cheap to super expensive. So, you know, the cliche about the Asian thriving modern sort of a country, usually the bigger, faster, cheaper, this holy trinity is a kind of a cliche for us, and we deliberately choose kind of really diverse conditions, these variables. So that's just a little intro. Our building is in the middle, and and then another thing is we deal with. Sometimes we're given almost conditions that are so specific that we almost have no choice that accept everything that defines it. And then sometimes, of course, we almost seem to have so much freedom. This is actually, the center is a KPF, Samsung, by the way, headquarters. This is our early work, which still is the largest building we have done so far. So I think our lecture, I actually deliberately show something quite specific at the beginning, and then later it will evolve into something more systematic because, you know, we are very excited about all the givens that we can deal with, the richness of it, but also, you know, we also want to have, instead of reacting very specific conditions also, we want to build into some kind of a knowledge, maybe system of something. So the very first project is a museum. It's like a small gallery. But I also have met the board members of Asian Art Museum a couple of years ago. So I thought this would be a good way to start. It's a part of the most historic part. And as I mentioned before, this is one of the smallest projects we've done so far. But it took the longest, so it took total 6 years going through a permit, and once was killed by landmark committee and so on somehow. Anyway, the site is not very big, 60% site coverage ratio is allowed. And as you can see, this sharp corner is almost defines the site. And then, but there's another one that is this traditional building across the street, which is the birthplace of the second president of Korea, which made it landmark, although it wasn't the most, let's say, the best traditional architecture preserved for the historic reason. So we have to have this kind of diagonal obligation to protect the view from their garden. So it's almost made us to build only half the allowed FAR. So which was below the size of the small gallery that this institution wanted to build. And you can sort of imagine the Flatiron, which is probably a lot of you agree that this will be like context-driven, the masterpiece, but our site is similar, sharp corner site, only 10 times, maybe 50 times smaller. But then we have this sectional obligation. So we more or less had to accept this form as it was given. So here's the elevation, but then you can see something sneaky happening, like almost half the building is floating just to kind of free up the corner a little bit. And then what we suggested to our client is that because you cannot build as much as you wish of this diagonal obligation, we have no choice to build it underground, the gallery. So we excavated 8-meter deep, double height gallery space, and then ground level becomes also almost obligation for 7 parking lots determined by the size of the floor area, entry for the gallery, and then supporting area, which is a kitchen for the building that emerged above the ground. By the way, the building is also, the site is sloped. And so it was also a structural effort to keep this somehow almost columnless and so on. And then the top 2 levels becomes more like a social place. So it's a restaurant where I meet Asian Art Museum members. And then the top level is a small office. It's also the social gathering space. So I'll just go through it. Yeah, so this is like very acrobatic. Sometimes we call it, we have this kind of agenda of making structurally very challenging, yet doesn't express as much, look at me, I'm a cantilever, but it's actually, this does that. So this triangular wall is spanning between this underground retaining wall, allow no columns for the gallery space, and then allow this envelope, which is a lobby, and you can look into this underground space. And then these are all kind of basically supported by this one leg tilted. And this, I mean, it's quite discrete building because so much limitation, but here I call it a vertigo moment, that at this corner you confront almost the view of 11 meters above and then 8 meters below, so almost 19 meters of this kind of verticality happens. So this is the entry of the gallery. I'll just, I call this Libeskind moment, which kind of found Libeskind moment. And this is the ground level. And then, although it's a funny shaped site, we try to make it almost classic. And it's one nice thing about it is that typically you go to galleries and you look up and you see this pretty beautiful natural light coming, but you kind of descend from like an angel from the light, where the light sources is, which is north facing, so it's kind of really not distracting. And then what's emerged from the ground is a restaurant, which is all bare concrete in this case. And then the diagonal obligation becomes a feature also. So it's all kind of a glass ceiling with triple layers of structure and mullions and light filtering louvers that create a different pattern. And that becomes an office. This is my kind of a favorite picture of these two couple dating, sitting on top of this without realizing what kind of acrobatic structural situation they are in. And this is more recent project. This is another very art project that is a very particular situation. The project is called Cool House, but it's kind of an ambiguous situation many ways because its client is a woman who's really sort of first generation of a brand consultant. It's very successful, and it was her retirement home. And she's been living by herself her life, and she collected enormous amount of art and design things. And this was her wish that she live in this museum and have public, I mean, it's tiny part is her private space, and the rest is her collection, basically. But almost, she kind of seduced me, saying the right things at the beginning, that I want Johnson Museum, but kind of a farmhouse version of it, or barn version of it. And I want the very cheap construction, because I would rather spend money in art collections and architecture, which I had to agree somehow. So, and I accepted it. And it's like what they call it, almost wishfully, Hamptons of Seoul, so hour away from Seoul, where the also kind of a traditional, where farmland and little village kind of merged together. And as you can see, it's almost this random sort of situation. And it's almost a collaboration with her, because she has very strong ideas. But you can see also the sort of almost no logic into this area around it. It's just a lot of it is accidental. That's a recent picture. And the idea was we want to create something that gives, you know, Johnson Museum was built over, it was a house actually, and over decades, over 3 buildings in addition, completely in kind of a no plan in a way, sort of a determined master plan way, but somehow in our case it would be between the client and me, which become good friend, kind of collaborated together, discovering, and she bought a little piece next door and so on, so it was constantly intense. So it's also building up here is a one piece, but it's almost sometimes has a multiple sort of illusions of multiplicity. So this is the entry where it looks nice because it's snow, but it's like a parking lot. And it's like, you know, various concave, convex sort of surfaces. And it has a different appearances, the backyard. One simple material, brick. We once did this pixel house. This would be like a mother version of it, about 14 times larger than Pixel House. One thing she initiated was she really wanted to have a big nothingness facing the river, little river. So, and then what I suggested was then you need a kind of a corridor along with it, so that become the kind of a consistent thing. So you can see the plan, this is where you enter, and then it's about 50-meter long, and this is what the largest, and so, and the west side is this way, so you have canopies, and this is where the river is. And I mean, you'll see the collection. It's very, let's say, diverse. She said she dreamed about having this kind of sharing with other people as a retirement friend for 30 years when she was like early 40s or late 30s, and it's a whole thing, they call it a house, so it's like, this is what they call library. And they are connected to even guest room, which is made of Jean Prouvé furnitures, the old kind of original piece. You can also tell she has diverse interests, first spaceman outfit, and this is what they call living room. And then as you go up, also, it's also instead of this white box, I mean, it's as a house is quite large, but as a museum it's quite nice, but we wanted to also engage the various surroundings. So it has narrow space, wide space, tall space. Upper level is also, like somehow the bedroom becomes a theme because she has many beds, purely abstract room, and so on. And this is where we call attic with Max Ernst bed sculpture in the 70s. And also space, again, kind of spills over downwards or outwards, and so on. And then the roof also get exploited with a Hedwig sponge chair, which become like a nice children's feature. And another exhibition space we did, somehow for me, I took it as a kind of a complete bizarre challenge to deal with this national identity through architecture. It was a 2010 Shanghai Expo Korean Pavilion. It was somehow we have to, this one is a kind of a classic, faster, bigger, cheaper I think I have to say, among the big pavilions, we've done the cheapest pavilion in the shortest time, and somehow become very popular. We took the icon, somehow we have to kind of communicate broadly. So we took the icon, we have amazing moon jars here and other Korean artifacts, but we took the kind of quite democratic one, which is the Korean alphabet. So, which is a completely abstract lines, horizontal, vertical, and diagonal, and circle, basically. It was invented by a king 500 years ago. And it's actually only alphabet that knows the author, the designer, which is a very democratic idea. And then, so what becomes very handy is that, it could translate easily into architectural element, like diagonal becomes escalators, and vertical, of course, becomes cores and so on. Of course, we have to do something forceful for the circle part, which become also nice restaurant entry facing the river. And then this will be like a cheap way, but we discover, like you do 20,000 panels, all different, but with the same cost with CNC cutting. Because we used to make repetitions to make it cheaper, but nowadays that's one benefit. Architectures, we have to just draw 20,000 panels by CAD, but that's how we achieved it. And then we also collaborate with the renowned, someone that I didn't know at the time before, but Ik-jung Kang, who's known for this kind of almost poetry-like text that he writes and turn into almost naive, like this crayon drawings text. And then, but important thing for us was we can almost see, this is Japanese pavilion, almost like an island, and you probably familiar with the map where Korea is a little appendage peninsula next to this huge Eurasian continent, and because of that situation, we have this quite maybe invasions, but also exchanges. So much happen, and somehow we create a kind of a interesting sort of a converging point of cultures. So we made many entries. But also it worked pragmatically that I don't know if you have seen these kind of expos, but expo is about waiting 3 hours in line to see 30-minute long, very disappointing exhibitions about technology. So we actually create a waiting area which has a kind of almost Bobardian open space which worked well for that period of time in Shanghai, which is tropical and also monsoon and rain and so on. So, and then we kind of inserted the map of Seoul, 1 to 300 in scale. So it's basically whole thing is like a birthday cake lid with the funny cutouts. So this is where you wait, and somehow, and this was a part that was architecture generate the content because they liked the idea, so that they had this kind of troops like Korean K-pop b-boys and traditional dancers, and like every hour, 30 minutes of every hour was this kind of superhuman performer performed there, so entertain people. And actually it was ended up visited by second most visited pavilion after China, so not that I'm trying to get that credit to us, but somehow, yeah, a lot of it is a K-pop actually. And where am I? And then I did another thing about Korea. It was 2014 Venice Biennale. Somehow I got this, my proposal was accepted for a Korean pavilion commissioner role and the curator. And it was an interesting challenge because the unusual thing about it was my ex-boss, Rem Koolhaas, he was very particular, so he did something unusual, that is that he imposed a very specific task, which is absorbing modernity from 1914 until 2014. And so when I thought of it as, because Korea was, as some of you know, 72 years ago, it was under Japanese colony from 1910. So if you look back 100 years back, it's actually, we used to be one country as a colony of Japan. So if we only deal with South Korea, that would be completely missing out the half the story. So that's the idea that kind of came about. And then I become a little bit quite megalomaniac that I thought maybe I can possibly make this opportunity, use that opportunity as a first, very historic one, which is what I imagine as a first architecture exhibition about Korean Peninsula, joint exhibition between North and South Korea, which I kind of knew that 1% maybe of the possibility, but I thought it was worth the effort. And it was also beginning of this two regime begin, the current president about to be impeached, and then the other one, the young third generation leader in North Korea. So I actually, first 8 months, I was just sending, it wasn't like a curatorial thing that I have this concept and then I pick here and there, but it was completely winging through different contact because legally I'm not allowed to contact North Korea directly, so I have to use people with a diplomatic relationships, so ambassadors and writers, and then as this process, of course, people who commissioned me, Korean Art Council, asked me, you got to have a backup plan for this. So of course, we were actually constantly thinking, but until the last minute, which is 5 months before the exhibition, I was constantly pursuing this. And at a certain point, it was a kind of coincide with some sort of warmer political climate between the two countries. Almost we had met them. Anyhow, it was basically it was just a long story, but just what we end up showing at the exhibition was a failed exhibition, basically, Plan B. But somehow during this process and people who were very interested and sympathetic. And so it was like really not an architecture sort of endeavor, but it was, as I said, it's much more involved with the UN and diplomats and different countries, and then end up kind of out of control I accumulated, which I tend to do somehow. And without getting into it, it was a way to highlight the differences, but also shockingly similar sort of things here. Some of the book page here, South Korea, of course, car, and then this is more like a city as a university campus with a library, and this is the old Gyeongbokgung Palace, where my first project is close by, but the presidential palace, you can see the similarity between, it's almost identical. And South Korea came up with that presidential palace later after North Koreans, so they're somehow influencing each other and so on. But of course, this is one of the architects. Yeres has a brilliant all the international organizations, political entities, North Korea, the gray area above South Korea, and then DMZ area, and how it's such a complex tangle that it's not just easily what is so much sensationalized and have been producing so much cliches about this matter that still I have no idea about. and then we somehow selecting 39 people's work, and basically shows a different time period of 100 years. And these are the trajectories, and actually touching 6 continents, which really shocked me. So initially what my ambition was to stay within this tiny little peninsula, somehow end up engaging quite kind of a broad sort of a spectrum of time and region. So I use, again, for me, is also architecture never the goal for me. An exhibition, same way. I try to use that as for something else. At a maybe bigger purpose. But you spend a lot of money. I did also good fundraising, partly Samsung, but. I use, because there's many different countries and they're both shared interests about North and South Korea architecture through art, architecture, photography, many different disciplines, filmmaking. So for me, it was a way to create a network using the opening as a very festive event. So I brought most of them, including very old legendary photographers and so on. And it was actually, for me, this was quite process-driven. This kind of process kind of took its own life. So it kind of continued what I was obligated to do, which is a homecoming show. And political situation wasn't very good, as you now heard about. It was only a couple of years ago. But nevertheless, it was kind of, we went kind of smoothly somehow. And then the New York private gallery, Tina Kim, you may heard her, very active. And she invited me for some reason. So we continue our show in New York. But one of the best things that came out for me in this process, unexpected, was 2 months after the opening, suddenly almost ambushed by a North Korean ambassador based in Rome with his beautiful daughter, and Alessandro Belgiojoso, who was part of our show, which is Milanese photographer, who had a show in both countries. So I call him like he reunited Korea through photograph work. He was kind of a sort of tour guiding. Yeah, I'm protecting her identity. One also nice thing also happening, there's so many other things and become kind of like my continuous involvement, but last year I was pleasantly surprised that AA school now having second year Pyongyang. In fact, they invited me for a conference last week for that, but I came because this was also important. So anyway, okay, where are we now? So, okay. And 5 years after this exhibition, I had a show at of our own show, like Me Time. I've done also other show about Design Biennale in Gwangju few years before that, Venice show. But this time was in this art place called Plateau, which they was somehow honored to show as a first architect. I was presented there, and we showed it was a 12-year work, but it was like almost every year we maintain always 30 people more or less, and we produce 12 projects a year, and 3 or 4 of them gets built. So we have done about by then 150 projects, and we built about 39 projects. By then, probably now about 45, I don't know. But we kind of selected, although I'm very unable person to edit things well, but 69 projects, including 30-something projects, and also lots of unbuilt projects. But typically, we call it before, after mass studies does architecture. It's almost architecture as a verb or more process. And typically the architecture, especially in the show, exhibition, always the narrative has been this biblical, almost beginning to an end sort of a narrative, that you start from this amazing napkin sketch on an airplane by this immaculate conception by an architect, and then you end up presenting this end, which is this finale of Iwan Barnes comes in and make this amazing, perfect moment. But for me, it was more like continuous sort of serial before and after, almost. And each moment, from client performs, and then architect comes in, makes a site visit. At certain point, structure has to perform, and then there's a construction workers and so on. And then the moment that we decide to show one room before is like almost like in our office, basically, clean version of our office, until the moment that architects finish work building it. And then after is basically our baby start their life, and some of them grow to be amazing, or some become like a crackhead, or just has a various life. Some already passed away, I'm sorry but this analogy, but quite intense. But it was, for me, it was like a way to opportunity to kind of see that, see this whole, what happens also, the life of the building. And somehow, this was our clean version of the office, without going through too much details. And then there's a moment almost discrete that you go through the wall of site pictures that we took, collection of site images. You enter through the dark room, which is, none of work is done by us, but about our work by fantastic photographers or daily liberal newspaper, political satire, cartoonists using our building as something, or even the client who kindly drew our building, who's a painter that we designed studio for her. Or also it's almost like an anthropology of these books that we presented without bragging, but it's like showing like Gold Digest to serious text, but what kind of project kind of become a hit, and what kind of a cultural context architecture is consumed. So it was actually quite fun to have just basically bring out everything we had for 12 years. And then I use this analogy. Architecture for me is more like a playing Go game, you probably heard of. It's also Asia, especially China, Japan, Korea, 3 important countries. Unlike the chess which has its already pre-given almost a priori hierarchy. The beauty of the Go is just by itself is completely neutral. But then one becomes very significant by the relation. So imagine each project is almost like white stone, and it really, the black stone is a changing world, basically. And it somehow really shifts the constellation and meaning becomes completely different. So this is like a daily newspaper published after the important match. Each number is at a time. And that's how you saw the little number of each project is the design year that we did. And followed by alphabetical order is the order of that each year. So the Plateau Show was year 14, and ABCD, the I. That was like 8th project or something. And then another thing that during my architect's career, I thought it was an interesting change in this world is in Korea, for the last 20 years, the proportion of the construction industry have reduced down 1/3 and over GDP. And then this one is the opposite. Same time, you can guess, the internet, basically. So basically, we have less and less thing to do and more shallow spreading, maybe share knowledge in the best sense, but also becomes a kind of inevitable two situations that we have to practice. That's kind of a global yet also Korean specific. And then, so we had these 2 rooms. Once you're confronted by this kind of you can either choose after or before, and there's kind of again, some sort of Asian reference. We call it a pictogram, but it's also like a hieroglyph. That it was a sort of opportunity to highlight 21 ideas that we were been preoccupied with, and we show it in the order of frequency, which was shocked that the courtyard variation was number 1, because it's kind of like we didn't even know that was like I thought like a matrix, a movement, these things there, but quite later. And I thought it was very interesting to actually survey our own work. So this was a brochure that shows in order what kind of project. By the way, the red numbers are the one that is not built. I just show you one thing. That's the number 10, formal structure from domino to domino, we call it. And this was a 2007. We did the fashion shop for Anne Demille-Münster, which I become a huge fan. You probably know. It's the architect's kind of a designer. Patti Smith is also big with that, right? Anyway, we did this something that is unusual at the time because I think it was a kind of reaction. We got sick of doing these sheetrock walls. I mean, like architecture used to be where the wooden traditional house structure, okay. It was a lot of it about how the ceiling was above you was constructed, but it was kind of a one-time thing. And then almost a year later, we did this installation called Air Force to support now ex-President Obama when he beat Hillary and become a Democratic presidential candidate. In Denver, there's a convention, and they invited like 10 artists, so we were happy to be part of it, 2008. And it was actually, it was all inflatable, but it was like 76 columns, but all sort of pre-made, this pneumatic structure. And this was when we started to like look at it as a system. And then almost same year, we were given this chance to imagine this island called Jeju, which is the largest island south of Korean peninsula, with this empty territory, which was about to be developed as a sort of Korean answer to Silicon Valley. And we had this kind of, imagine this simple 5 structure forms that could be combined in different ways. And then somehow create these diverse spatial conditions. For the show, we turn into interactive, again, performative children babysitter section, which worked quite well. Like we call it DIY Daum project. And then we'll show you some of the images. Yeah, it's now they're quite happy. They're doing like they have their own organic farm garden. They are all Seoul people, but moved down 350 of them. So it was also kind of a bold move that something like that happened, like because it's been about being concentrated in the Seoul city. but people with interesting ideas now start making exodus from Seoul. In this case, I think it's quite inspired by Silicon Valley here. So they actually do have like, ping pongs and free juice bars and lots of other things, but somehow there is American element to it. But it's also, for me, it was like a Silicon Valley, all these buildings are so anti-architecture almost, right? You got this slide and colorful things, and all you need is a warehouse, but we kind of give them the opposite, like Umberto Eco, name of the roads, kind of a medieval situation. But that's when, people in that story, when they become priests to get information back then. So I think it works for them too. And they're so, and then now they completely changed their ownership. Now it's a Kakao, but absorbed. They still exist, town, but again, it's so dynamic. But it's somehow architecture kind of lasts longer. And then this was a model. And I'll just show you quickly how this evolved into other kind of idea, because I just wanted to show it as how this constellation of idea turned into larger scale competition. We went in a second round. And then this one is kind of like opposite take on this kind of formal structure, not as a sort of a growing, unfinished way, but this one is like a complete structure. And then the domino, I want to end with this, and then we came back to this, to Seoul, across the street from our office, that is just almost rental office, but we come up with this very simple plan with service behind and then square plan. Thing was, it's almost 17-meter square, so you cannot have just one span. It's too much for RC concrete. So we shifted it, the grid, 12-meter it become, and then you got this sort of upturned beam because we want to have like a raised floor for the things, other services. And then as we realized, we can carve the in the middle part because the air AC doesn't have to reach the center, only the periphery. So then it become that. So it's almost like we brought what we learned somehow in a kind of a systematic approach to and do this. So we kind of built it in time for 100-year anniversary for Corbusier's domino. So that was already now 3 years ago. And this is how it was shown in the before room, and this is how it's shown in the after room. I think I'm going to end my talk here. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, beautiful room, wonderful audience. What questions do you have for tonight's speaker? I feel them brewing. Here we go. Claire.
Hi. So you've run offices in both New York and Seoul. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the differences in the environment, both architecture environment, client environment, aesthetic environment, or whatever environment you want to talk about.
Okay. Initially, before almost a year and a half before I started my practice, 2003, I was one-man branch office of Joe Slade, which is a good classmate, which is also still a best friend in New York. And it was just, initially what the mission was just to have a small pixel house finished. And then we had other opportunity through different clients to have a small interior job that involved with the facade, which was very exciting at the time because for 5 years we haven't done like facade. It was mostly really nice interiors. And it took us two months to build everything from design to build. And which I translated like 6 times faster, so my day in Korea will be a week in New York. That was a fantasy I had. And and in certain ways, it was that instant sort of a situation was deeply appealing after this frustrating 5 years of not being able to get out of the door and contain. I mean, we had some exciting competitions and exhibitions and things. So that was the beginning, but yet I become, and then it kind of quickly grew also. So my office been 30 people for like 10 years now, but it was like third year, we have when almost 40 people. All it takes is one big project and like really carried away with the design, very complex typologies. And so we were very happy to do that, to create jobs and also, and without, I realized, as I said at the very beginning, those conditions actually no longer appealing to me. So I'm trying to balance and actually explore different speed. And I think it was also very, when I went back, it was very liberal time. And it was also, the really social progress was happening, very happening. And then quickly, 5 years later, it becomes something else, maybe similar to what was happening in America. And as you know, I mean, architects, you always work with the money and power, right? And people, you want to work with and nice them. And certain political situation, people behave badly. So for me, it was a really downer for the last 9 years. But so I actually, somehow it was an intuition that I switched to much more low-key project. And at the very beginning, I think Jonathan has mentioned, and a lot of things been published, is these kind of very early, with kind of a very exciting political time, which I began and freely explore these kind of large scales, but I've been kind of refraining ourselves from that. Actually, I ran out of time, so I didn't show my recent projects, but it's actually more like an institution. I mean, we still do actually slum on appropriate situations, but I don't know. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, it seems to be now everywhere is shifting, so. Yes, please.
First of all, I really like your project. The fact that the diversity of your project, each project has its own very strong formal gesture or dealing with different contexts. It feels, but at the same time, in a macro perspective, I almost feels like it's formless because each one has so different. It doesn't have a kind of prescribed stylistic language. So here comes my question. So as a Korean architect, right, you were born in Korea and you grew up in, mostly grew up in Korea, and how that, let's say, Koreanness impacts your, let's say, kind of architectural style, or is it really important to address, like, in this age, as a Koreanness to within your body of work?
Okay, thank you for the question. First, having no style, that is something that is very deliberate, actually. Not deliberate, but it's like my goal is actually not to bore with myself or what I do, because I spend most of my time awake doing work. So some people are known for a certain architectural language and methodology, but the consciously, almost there is a tendency of architects almost develop their career like an artist. I think it's really not for a place like Korea, which actually have so much dynamism and kind of different roles as an architect. So I like to be able to fully explore that. And also, I think it's like, I realize also the whole trajectory has been, we try with this kind of a happy time, large project, developer-driven project, and then it become like a blockbusters. And then, 300 developers all over the country comes to you, and I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I choose to do something often that I hate to do, like we're building this shopping mall, but to improve it, and then, but somehow, and then there was a whole expo pavilion was that also moment, because again, this with the Korean identity, which I was like, for me it's like hopeless sort of a position to present the country somehow, but then we did it, and then the Yosu Expo followed 2 years later, so we are actually like busy avoiding that. And then, of course, the curatorial project, that is very helpful for me, but then somehow the Venice got us recognition, and then I got asked to do so many exhibitions, like, And somehow, I think it's this whole system maybe has to do with the economic system, but once you're good at something, they make you like a robot and like just pitch perfect. You have to have this, what do you call it? Like this snippet of this 3-minute, no, almost 5-second story about you, and then just, you just have to deliver bigger and bigger, and which I found is just like less exciting for me. So I think also it's not for me, I like to have a fun and sort of explore different things through what I do. So, and Korea again, yeah, I mean, I am interested. Partly it was an ironic thing, but after Korean Expo Shanghai and then this Venice thing, which is very two different kind of Koreanness that I did it. I think I did it in a very unusual way, but I am serious. And also partly my agenda has been that, the Asian Art Museum here is fantastic. I'm very happy to see a Korean room here. Just before I saw it, I went through the whole thing. Like the most demure kind of I like that. But also that is when 50 years ago maybe. Korea is now like the most urbanized country in the world, and there are a whole other aspect that has developed. And for me, tradition, I'm really with Mr. Caesar, the master, has said. I think he says something like, if there's a tradition, it's worth following if it contains the element of change or something like that. And I do believe that. And I think Korea over 1,000 years, there are radical changes, and I think that's how I see it. So. Please.
First, thank you for the great talk. And then you have this before and after exhibition as you're wrapping up your past 12 years of math studies.
Yes.
And can you imagine another exhibition after like 12 years from now on?
I was thinking maybe every 5 years I'll do an exhibition. That is kind of my luxury R&D kind of thing, but not about ourselves. I think our work maybe 10 years, 20 years later, but it would. I also used exhibition wasn't really a goal to put our work on a pedestal, but more like a survey, like sort of having a shrink of your company or something, like with the curators, and that's what's really important for me. So. Yeah, but I am dreaming of some other kind of show about other people's work. But it's in the talk. But for me, that's very exciting for me because what architects do is like 1% inspiration and 99% compromise, according to Saint Jacob. But with exhibition, I found so much purity, and it's healthy for me to be able to do both. So that's, thank you. Please.
You briefly mentioned the transition of your work now into more low-key projects, and I was just wondering, what is your ideal type of project now, or the types of work you're looking to get into?
Oh,
Or
I'm not like a big master plan, 10-year ahead kind of a person, but I just climb one mountain and then I go up and I see other opportunity, but for me, I haven't been able to produce something that I'm completely happy with. Probably it will never happen, right? It's this cliche. Architects say, our next project will be my favorite. I'm working on it right now, a couple of them, but I don't know. But for me, I like to actually be able to focus more somehow. As I said, every 1 year I design like almost every month new project, including lots of lost competitions. 12 projects a year, that has been the pattern. But maybe 11, 10, I do less and less and longer, because getting old, maybe. Yeah, but also like something that I have a luxury of focusing better. Yeah. I think also not because because that was very different from initial agenda. Because I was, influenced by Dutch realist, sort of a dirty realist influence, and that was a good time to explore when I come back to Korea. But I realized it's more and more relevant to have other kind of a role that is kind of that doesn't happen automatically, just as a way to contribute something. Yeah? So otherwise, you just part of the redundancy, massive redundancy. Yeah. Okay.
We have
Please.
time for, oh, there we go.
Thank you. You had mentioned that the construction industry is down to a third of what it used to be,
Yes.
and that
2/3, so 1/3 less. Yes.
1/3 less. And you had consciously decided to stay in Korea to do most of your work. Why have you not decided to expand if it's contracting the industry?
I mean, that was over 20 years of time, and still compared to, because it was like 24% of the GDP to like 16% now, something like that. And that's still a lot, that's still, that's kind of the developed country standard. And yeah, so it's still a lot of opportunities, and architecture takes commitment. I mean, there was a moment that where I think first internet, globalized generation, there's a fantasy about this whole nomadic practice, moving around like a email order, some thing. And I think that seems to be creating an interesting opportunity, but a lot of them didn't turn out to be a good way to produce, I think, interesting buildings. I mean, that's what I observed. So I somehow, just Korea kept me so busy. I mean, if I probably grow and our team become more able, then I'll be happy to. I mean, now we're doing a little project in Hong Kong, and we're very happy to also find ourselves in a very and contribute, because there's a role of being an outsider to actually point out and see the potential. I think that's what I learned maybe from REM also, moving around. So I'm not undermining all that, of course, but I think it's a different time also. Okay.
When you first begin a project, do
Yes.
you do you go to like the pen and paper? Like, what is the first step? Do you go to the computer and model, or just what is
That's an interesting question, because I do use pen and paper, although I used to be good at computer, but now it's like, running, meeting people. But interesting thing I wanted to tell you at the beginning when I was showing all the project was that I always, there's always this friction between all this overwhelming information from the site and the context, whatever that is composed of, and then there's a concept that you want to generate and impose, right? They're always in tension, but some are more this way, the other way. And I always try to come up with our own concept before I go to construction site, the site, because you can get so much information from Google already without even visiting. Because with knowing that I'm going to be completely defeated by all the site discoveries, but somehow it developed as a pattern that I actually try to impose something, and then okay, this is stupid, but somehow I think there's this tension. I like to continue. So again, it's very different. Like I said, certain projects are almost like a last piece of puzzle, jigsaw puzzle, that you really have no choice, but you're given this shape. Like very first project I show, and then like the last project, town project, is almost like you have to come up with a box of new Lego set or something like the new system that you have to imagine how it grows. And I think also the richness of my place that I'm practicing has given me both kind of situations. So it's quite a blessing for me. Yeah.
So we have time for one last question.
Hi, I was lucky to visit the expo, the stadium, not the stadium, pavilion in Shanghai.
Did you wait for 3 hours?
It's more than 3, actually, because it was one of the weekends and everyone was, because it's really nice to stay under the shade, and Korea Pavilion managed to make it.
If I had known, I would say just peek in and not worth to go upstairs.
Yeah, I actually spent like 20 minutes in the building, and then I got pushed out. But I want to say, because it's a temporary expo, right? The building stay for half a year. So I feel like the Korean Pavilion was one of the very few buildings that really seem like playful, and you did enjoy the structure or the design, but most of the other pavilions are kind of formal and decent in a way. But then I see all the other projects that you've done, you are actually not like that kind of playful on the design. So just curious why you chose to do that.
As I mentioned, this was very beginning. I mentioned about the different temporal conditions that we explore. We have done 2-hour lasting project, which was a stage design, which has to travel to. One thing I didn't mention about this first project in Korea that we completed with a facade 2 months, for 2 months, which I was very excited, disappeared 2 years later. So you can only imagine why that has to be that way. It's almost like a Kleenex. There's a genre for disposable architecture, and which I thought it was fascinating to contribute, but then now got bored with it. But Expo was 6 months long, like expectation also. So a lot of project there was like architect become very ambitious, and in a very cheap means they try to build it like it lasts forever, and which I thought was problematic. And in fact, being faster and bigger, maybe it's not, but cheaper was a very good position because it was about the sustainability, which was almost an oxymoron of building this city scale, city of temporary buildings and talk about sustainability. So in that sense, we were by square meter half as cheap as the second cheapest building, which was a Spanish pavilion. So and also 90% of the building were all recycled. I mean, which was thanks to their very strict regulation of recycled material. Plus, our artist Ik Jung Kang, we had this idea. I suggest that he signed the little panels and sell it like almost like a Berlin Wall after pieces. He did it, and then he donated the money to I think one of those UNICEF. Anyway, so we made it all kind of try to make it as much as cohesive. Thank you.